Welcome to Fuzzybutts and Friends. Well, as much as it drives Fuzzybutts all over this place, absolutely crazy when they hear me say it. I am the host of this show, your big dog, Luke Robinson, and I'm back again with you this week. And look over to my left, who's also back with us again, is Ginger Morgan. She's the co-host, co-producer of this show, and she's also the executive director of the Puppy Up Foundation. Ginger, how are you?
I am doing well. So I'm surprised you didn't introduce me as your little dog
Oh,
like I
your
did last
dog.
week.
That was a painful intro. You took my very beautiful, funny intro, and you just, no, it was cute. It was cute. Yes, yes, you always have referred to yourself kind of tongue-in-cheek as the little dog of Puppy Up. I'm the big dog, but you are all of what, 5'2", 5'1"?
I'm 5'2.5". Thank you very much.
Are you really? I thought you were taller than that. I don't even know. Well, you wear it well.
No,
Carry it well. There we go. Well,
I
well,
project myself as being 5'6". So there you go.
you have a large type personality, as you do. I think our guest today also has a large personality, but she has some very large, interesting topics to discuss with us today. Ginger, I'm excited. I'm actually kind of scared because it's an area which I'm not that familiar, and but I'm very interested in it. It's Julie Louther. She is with Infinite Joy Now. I love the name of that. I think all of us could use some infinite joy now. And she's here, Ginger, to talk to us about communicating with animals, telepathy, Reiki, a wide variety of topics that we don't really talk a lot about. Julie, welcome to Fuzzybutts and Friends. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. Thanks for having me on the show.
It's our pleasure. Well, we like to start the show. We kind of like to, before we delve into the topics of telepathy and communicating with your the Fuzzybutts that we've lost. We'd like to keep it light. So tell us, do you currently have any Fuzzybutts with you? Alive, I mean.
I do, and she's sitting right next to me. Here's a picture of her.
There she
Oh,
is.
she's beautiful.
What's her
Her
name?
name is, oh, well, hang on, I'm losing the focus. All right. Let me see if I can get it off. Her name is Maya. She will be 12 on the 23rd of May.
Maya,
I can get her to focus in. I can't.
Yeah, I think you have. It's tricky. It's especially if you have. I think if you have tracking or something, it gets a little weird.
Oh.
If you have it on your desktop or your laptop, you could always share it. I can allow you to share the picture of Maya if you'd like.
Okay, I don't know how to do that.
Don't worry about it. I think she looks like a Sheltie or a cattle dog of some sort.
She is a Australian Shepherd, Red Merle.
Okay, I kind of got that right. They're cattle dogs, correct?
No.
Oh.
So cattle dogs are Aussies on steroids is how I would put it. Australian Shepherds are a little more biddable in my experience than cattle dogs. And cattle dogs tend to have really short hair.
Okay.
And I think they have less coloration difference than Australian Shepherds. But Australian Shepherds were actually developed in the US. I don't know why they were called Australian Shepherds. There's a whole history on that, I'm sure. But she is my fourth Aussie. I've had 4 total with her. And I love the breed because I like to do things and they are action figures. You know, they like to explore and go and do. But I think of cattle dogs as like more driven. That's all I can say.
Yeah, but definitely a working dog though, and they're also a herding dog, correct? They are.
Yes.
Okay, I guess in my unusual brain, I guess I kind of just associate the herding dogs and just lump them into the cattle dogs. Again, right before we started the podcast, I have this org chart in my brain sometimes, and it's messy. It's not always organized, but
Yeah.
Maya is beautiful. I'm glad you have a fuzzy butt with you, and she's beautiful. So tell us, Julie, tell us about your origin story. How did you get? I went on your website and I see, like me, you once were in the business world, and you went from the business world, a very analytical, science-based, that should be a science-based and structured universe, into one that just it's not so well defined. So tell us your origin story.
Sure. Yeah. And when I've been thinking about that, reflecting on it after I got your list this morning, and I was born able to see, hear, and think things. And like I would know conversations before people said the words. I could feel my animals, feel what I want to say, even the wild, animals in my neighborhood, things like that. And I talked to my mom about it when I was probably 8 or 9, and she told me to pray to God to take it away. And yes, she knew. I mean, I think she also had it. I'm sure she did. But, I was raised in a strict Catholic upbringing. And so there was a huge component of spirituality, to pray to your angels and saints, to pray to God and Jesus. But then there was this disconnect. And, but yet, in my household growing up, I was still very much, or as much as my mom told me that, she was also somebody that if she wasn't happy, nobody was happy. So I was very, used my intuition a lot as a kid to support me, in getting along at home. And the animals, I had a near-death experience when I was 10, and who brought me back was the dog I had at the time. Her name was Smokie. I'll never forget it. I was in the hospital and I had crossed over and I had seen all these beings. And then she came to the front and forward and said, "It's not your time." She was only, oh, it makes me want to cry talking about this. She was probably only 6 months old at the time, but she's who called me back to staying on Earth. And she lived for another 6 or 7 years. She passed kind of early. She developed diabetes and passed. But when you say that about the left brain world and the right brain world, I was also, yes, very good at analytical things. I got a degree in finance. I worked in banking. I worked at the county government, and I did IT. And this was like back, I started in IT in 1999. And I was new. I mean, I was a novice, so to speak, and learning on the job. And there was something that wasn't working, and we couldn't figure out what was wrong. Our email was completely down. So this is like 2000, year 2000. I don't know if you're old enough to remember the "I love you" virus, but it was that one that just flooded servers. And we were trying to figure out what to do. And I got a download of checking. I don't know if you've ever looked in the guts of applications, but there's paths, it's like C, program files, blah, 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 blah. And I said, let's go look there. And that was the fix. And my coworker who looked at me, he kind of went, "What?" And I said, "Hey, I'm just telling you, this is what I got." And so I would weave both of those things together, little bits of the, if you want to call it more right-brained, but bringing in that there's so much more than what we actually see, feel, and touch and know. That there is that into our, that it's there for us to tap into if we so choose to. And so then I transitioned. So in 1989, I got my first dog as an adult. And her name was Alta. And I brought up this plate I made of all of the animals that passed, and here it's lost.
Move it back towards your face a little bit. I think there you go. Right there.
I think she has for those of you who are watching us at fuzzybuttsstudios.com, I think she has tracking technology.
It's perfect right there.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
So the golden up in the corner, that's Alta. And
wow.
then next to, yeah. And
you're very first.
Yes, as an adult.
And
then in the middle with the Kong on the rope is Sadie, who was number 2. And then, okay, come on, I'm taking it back. So Sadie, then Luke, who passed 13 years ago. No, excuse me, 12 years ago. And then Molly, who passed in 2008. And then up in the corner is Flash, who was a cat that I had with Alta, Sadie, and Luke. Anyway, so Alta was like the child I never had. and I poured so much love into her. And when she passed, the whole point of me telling you the story is when she passed, I was completely inconsolable. I felt like I had lost, and I wound up putting her down. She was having kidney failure, and I felt like I had killed her. And that was the struggle that I was having, was how can I have done this to her, even though I knew she was passing. So I had talked to a couple communicators, and finally I was talking to a friend of mine who said, have you heard of Penelope Smith? And I said, no. And she's considered like the grandmother of animal communication. She started offering her services in 1971 in California. And so this was the fall of 2002. And I went to her website, and there on her homepage was a picture of a humpback whale in the ocean. And it said, have you ever wanted to swim with the whales? And the memory came back to me of, as a child, telling my family I was going to swim in the ocean with the whales someday. And everybody, of course, laughing at me like, you know, that was in the 50s. You didn't think like that, right? 50s, 60s. And so in order to go with Penelope on this trip, you had to take a class in basic animal communication. And and in the area where I live was a person named Asia Voigt. She had an in-person class like a month later, and I took it, and the rest is kind of history. But I always credit Alta with bringing me back to what my heart and my soul calling was, or is. You know, she reminded me and brought me back to that. And yeah, so that's how I transitioned.
That interesting term for that you would refer to as transitioning, maybe more for the analytical scientific world, transitioning to more of spiritual energy world. But I want to go back to, you and I are very similar. Is I have a serious analytical scientific mind. I also have a BBA in finance and accounting, and spent my early life pursuing that until my first dog Malcolm was diagnosed, and it changed the world. It changed everything for me. And none of it, what I did before, it just didn't, none of it made sense to me. And I find it fascinating. You have one of your dog's name is Luke, because I'm like you. I have always been a sensitive person. I've been sensitive to things, and I've tried most of my adult life to hide that, because growing up in Texas, you don't want people to know that you're sensitive. That's a character flaw that you just want to exercise or hide it. And unfortunately, that's something I've done most of my life. But I truly, and especially with my dogs, and I feel like that I wouldn't call it communicating, but I just feel I'm empathic. I've always kind of referred to it as empathic with them, and I've been fascinated by the topic because I have known people in my life that it seemed to me they were able to take what I have and amplify it, right? They amplify it so that they could have more of a better, rather feel it, actually understand it, and give meaning to it. So I find that fascinating. I also find it fascinating that your mother tried to have you pray it away, because I don't know how many years I've tried to pray it away, please take it away. I just don't, I want to be stoic. I don't want to feel anything. Especially after I lost my first dog, Malcolm, to cancer. I just tried to obtund my feelings and all the feelings that I had, that I just didn't know how to make sense out of it. So it's amazing that your dog Alta really is your inflection point, I guess, in your life. So okay, so you had this inflection point, you transitioned, as you said, as you referred to it. So what was your next step? Because what you do now, there's a lot of things. I guess, and we talked previously briefly about, prior to the show, about how I'm trying to structure this in my mind. Is I think there's kind of a broad heading of communicating with animals, and there are so many different ways that you can do that. So can you just walk us through that, and how you navigate it, how you found all the different ways that you can communicate non-verbally with animals?
Yes, sure. And you know, it all started actually with me. I like I said, I had that NDE when I was 10, but I was kind of born sick, is how I want to put it. And I spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to be healthy, because I just had different, let's just put it this way, I just had a lot of health issues happen. And so I started, alternative and complementary stuff was sort of new on the horizon. So I studied things like polarity therapy and yoga and Tai Chi and basically mindfulness, all sorts of different modalities that opened up that. And so I was walking like two parallel paths, living this left brain world, but then exploring the right brain. And as I was taking those classes, I started recognizing, yes, very feeling. I could feel things, I could see things, I could hear things, I could smell, taste, and have the knowing, which is all the clairs, the clair sentience, all of those things. And so I was sort of like almost baby stepping into that until that event with Alta and going on the whale trip, which sort of just like projected me out. And I stayed in the left brain IT world for another 7 years, part-time, and started my offering my services in 2006, because I had felt like people needed to know and understand and have a deeper communication, feeling and heart. It's all in the heart of why our animals are with us, and as I said, so Alta, she passed in 2002. I had gotten Luke in 2000, and he pushed me to the edge of what I could think, feel, and do. Very driven, very nippy, couldn't be around people. In fact, until he was 10 years old, he could not be around anybody except me and my ex-husband. So,
Wow.
and the what do I want to call her? The foster person. He was brought up on a transport with 11 other dogs from Kentucky. And Luke is one of my greatest teachers. And I loved him so much. And I would like to tell a story about him, but I don't know if it's right now. So I can ask you that. But he was, we got him in May and went to an Aussie rescue picnic a couple months later. And the rescue rep, I had been emailing her back in 2000. That was, you didn't have texting and things like that. And I was telling her what a challenge he was. And she came walking up to us, and we had Alta and Sadie. And she bent down to say hi to him. And he jumped up and bit her up and down the arm about 15 times. And I absolutely was horrified. She, thank God for her, because she just stood there and let him bite. He never drew blood. He never hurt her. And then it was like the shutters came off of him, and he looked at her and he started wiggling. But this was Luke. And she stood up and looked at me, and she said, "I'll take him with me today and I'll go put him down." I had you were emailing me, but I had no idea it was this severe. And my former husband said, "Nope, Julie thinks she knows what she can do with him. Let her do it." And I made that commitment to Luke. Believe me, I had many breakdowns. And one day, he was about 4 months later, we were out walking, and I became an expert at finding out of the way places to go where we wouldn't see other people or dogs. And we were out, and he was being a jerk, and like nipping at the other dogs and just being a jerk. And I said, "Okay," I said, "this is the story. Either you make your mind up and become part of this family, or I'm done with you." And I was standing there crying in this beautiful 500-acre park. And I just started walking away. He was off leash. He was gone for about 5 minutes. And then he showed up and he changed. And, this was before Alta passed, right? So, why I'm saying this is what you said that about how everything changed for you with your dog and being diagnosed with cancer. They come to us for a reason, and they come to us and help us break us open and shift who we are very as profoundly and as deeply as we are able to. And our consciousness obviously changes over time and how we see things, but he they all were teachers, but he really helped me think about all the training in the world isn't going to fix this. All the at the time lure and reward was about it. Clicker training was sort of new on the horizon. All sorts of positive things weren't really being readily available or supported by the training world. And so I always felt kind of, in a desert, in a sense of, I don't know what to do, and having to call on the spiritual end of things.
Yeah, you had to communicate with him in a different language or a different way so that he understood you. That's fascinating. Ginger, I'm a dog named Luke that doesn't play well in the sandbox with others and is a troublemaker. I'm surprised you didn't jump right all over that one.
I was letting her finish, but it doesn't surprise me. I wouldn't, just for everybody else out there, I wouldn't name my dog Luke. But I do want to tell a really quick story. I'll make it really short. So I had rescued this old dog named Faye, and she was very, very feral, and she would pace constantly. And at the time, I was a runner, and I couldn't run with her because she was too young, and for many reasons. But I had taken a couple of classes in healing touch, and I thought it was fascinating. And so one night she had gotten up in the bed with me by my feet, and I did some stuff with her, and I talked to her, and I was like, my feet are so very, very important to me because I run. It takes me, we can go for walks, all these things. I was telling her about my feet. I said, so I need you to guard my feet at night.
Oh,
she slept at the end of my bed for probably years.
Wow.
After that, I was like, oh my gosh, I could get some sleep.
Well, and what clarity. I mean, the fact that you gave your dog, an exact explanation.
Yeah.
That's what they need. They need us to be, because that's beautiful. That's a beautiful story. I love it.
So how do you differentiate, Julie, then, for experiences like that? How experiences similar to that, and how do you differentiate that from interspecies telepathy? Is it just, you said earlier, you kind of felt like, I think you said earlier that people have it innate within them. So then do you have to develop that and train? Is that just something you, like everything else, you just have to develop and train and grow over time?
Yes. And, and so the, one of the things that Penelope, had shared back when I was, working to let go of my filters of understanding and being open was, you think about a person with a newborn baby. After a while, they're like, oh yeah, I know she needs this, or I know he's asking for that. We're born with that telepathic connection. And then what happens is, oh, he said his first word. Oh, he started, they started talking. And so then it sort of gets conditioned out of us and goes into disuse. And depending on where you are on the spectrum of, I'm asking, my guides are stopping me, where you are on the spectrum of awareness is how much it stays with you through your life. And yes, it can obviously be regained. And And why I said the word humble is because it's very, the wisdom that you can gain by being open to hear and receive and dropping your own internal personal filters. You know, like people will say, oh, he's just, like I said about Luke, he's just being a jerk. Well, I was not understanding him. So then I labeled him. And I want to say one more thing about that with him, because he's reminding me, is he was probably 8 or 9. And I, again, was trying to explain to somebody why he, trying to explain why he couldn't be around people. Because of course that makes them like stare at him and, make him uncomfortable and all these things. And he said to me, when are you going to stop calling me a rescue? Because rescue creates connotations both in my mind and the people I'm talking to. We all have our perspective of, like, that explains away why they're not perfect. And the truth of the matter is they are a spirit just trying to make their way on this earth as just like we are. And it's, being open to understand and, the whole thing with having all the clairs is that, I just worked with somebody last week on this where they're like, oh, it just couldn't take that this dog had to like stop and sniff for 4 or 5, what seemed to them forever. And I'm like, yeah, but you don't understand that there's all these rich smells that their noses smell. And I could say, I could smell this and they could smell this many hours ago and this. And so it's like almost like putting yourself in their shoes and being able to see and know and understand the world from their perspective, which then stops us from trying to force them to be somebody other than who they're ready to be or capable of being.
Yeah, I made note when you called Luke a jerk. First, that it certainly applies to me. It could apply to me, but I also made note. It was like, wow, that's interesting that you would say that, because he's not. You're just not understanding. You guys aren't communicating. The two of you aren't
100%.
communicating,
Yep.
and you corrected yourself, or clarified yourself, I should say. But I feel the same way. I have my fuzzy butt number 4, Indiana. He's 12. He has peripheral neuropathy, and now he's almost completely immobile in his hind legs. And so he's entirely dependent upon me and to get up, and he can't get up on his own. So I have to hold him up for the most part when he eats and does his business and drinks water. And sometimes it's so frustrating because Pyrenees are notorious as being independent breeds. I call them stubborn SOBs. That's just what I say. Being from Texas, that's what we call them. But it's just the nature of their breed, and I understand it because they were, left in the mountains to tend and protect and guard the livestock up in the mountains, and so they had to. They're very smart. They had to fit, like your Aussies are very intelligent, and so. But the one thing that he absolutely drives me nuts is I have an inside bowl of water that he's always drank from and did so just fine. But I'm staying with my brother, and he has a couple of his dogs here, and they had the water bowl on the outside, and it's a fenced-in area on the outside. And so I guess we'd been here a few weeks, and so I decided to let him drink from the outside water bowl, and now that's all he wants to drink from. He absolutely refuses to drink from the inside dog water bowl. And we're talking about, he will whine and wake me up at 1 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, all times during the night, all throughout the day. And I get him up to try to give him the water, please drink your water indoors. You've been doing it for a long time. I will empty it, clean it out, give him a fresh, I'll do everything. And it's no. So,
Maybe he just likes that bowl. Bring that bowl inside.
No, that was I've switched out the bowls. I clean out all the bowls,
Oh.
and so it's not that. It's the exact same bowl. It looks the same. They don't look different. There's no discernible difference other than one sits outside and one is inside in his room. And there are times when it's irritating, and I use more strong words than jerk. Sometimes when he wakes me up at 3 o'clock in the morning, I have bags on my eyes. I haven't been sleeping well, and he's entirely dependent upon me. So I just think the question I ask him is, why do you want to make my life more difficult? Because you need me to have sleep, because I have to, I have to expend a lot of energy. I spend probably 5 hours, maybe 6 hours of my day taking care of Indiana. And for the past month and a half, that's all I've been doing. And so I don't know how to communicate with them and say, hey, don't try to make my life a little bit easier. I know you're stubborn. I know you want to do things your way, but try to work with me, please. Sweetheart, work with me. So that would be something that I would want to know. And I'm curious, what am I not understanding? What am I not, why would he do that? And what do I need to do to try to understand? I mean, I'll pay for your services. If somehow I can communicate, you can give me the answer why. Because I don't know how much your services cost, but I'll pay whatever just so I can know. I got to know the answer. Why is the outside bowl versus the inside bowl of water?
Okay, so two things I got from, what's the name?
Indiana Jones.
Indiana. Okay, Indiana. I just saw Pyrenees and I couldn't remember what you said the name was. One is getting outside, wanting that fresh air. And number two, though, is it two different water sources?
Same. Absolutely same. Yes.
So you're getting it both out of the same water faucet?
Uh-huh. Yeah, I have a pitcher and I filled both up at the kitchen sink, which it's a big kitchen. There's a veranda and fenced-in backyard. And so I do the
But it would be colder. It would be colder outside.
It could be. It's still chilly in the morning here in San Antonio. It could be a lot. It's one of those questions that it's probably a multiple choice answer, right? There are probably several factors. Being outside, I would definitely agree with that, but I do take him out a lot. I mean, I take him outside a dozen times a day, and then I'll set him outside just so he can enjoy the air.
Yes.
But this is what Indiana's telling her, right?
Yes.
That's what,
and that's
okay,
what, thank you. Yes. Thank you for saying that, Ginger, because yes, I got right away the smell. And I agree, it's the outside smell.
Yeah.
I think that we may not be aware of this. And I guess I've never thought of it this way, this is what I love about communicating with animals, is sometimes the perspective, my own perspective shifts, is it gets different oxygenation when it's outside than in our inside stale air.
And right, and also smells, right? We know that
Yes.
indoor house smells, right? And sometimes hopefully it smells good. But if you have I thought maybe air fresheners, because John has a lot of air fresheners in here that are plugged into the walls. And I wonder if they emit chemicals and
100%.
Yeah, that was my theory about it. But it just reminds me I need to take that out of my wall, because if that's valid, the chemicals get in the water, and God knows none of us need more chemicals. None of us need more chemicals. But it raises an interesting point, though, for you, Julie, that with me, and I don't know, this is why I'm not you, or I haven't been something like you, is because my right brain and my left brain fight all day long. That's why I'm tired. All day long, they fight with each other. The analytical side of me analyzes all the different variables. And the left side of me just says, just go with your intuition, go with your gut. That's the thing, where you can't explain all the different reasons. And so, the good thing is I just take him outside to get water. That's my solution. I'll get up at 3 o'clock in the morning. I'll complain about it a lot. I'll call him a couple of choice color names, but I love him that way. And, But do you have that conflict in your head anymore, or have those two sides made peace? Do they collaborate?
Yes.
Okay.
They collaborate. Thank you for saying that, because I was going to say to you, and I kind of, have gone with the flow, is that left brain analytical detective type mind has served me well. Mm-hmm. Because I can tease out those nuances, and I can go, okay, I don't quite understand what you're saying, tell me more, explain it to me different, show me it in a way I can understand and share it with the person. A lot of times the animals talk in metaphors because you can understand, for example, blah blah blah, whatever it is. it's like, and then the person go, oh yeah, I get that. So it's really beautiful because they're willing to work with us and reach us where we are at.
I love how you said that. They talk in metaphors. What about if they actually communicate in concepts, like almost like in images, metaphors, concepts? Because
Mhm.
I when I was doing due diligence on your website and really thinking about this and preparing for this podcast, I found kind of what I would say when you say interspecies telepathy, well, there's thousands, if not millions, of different species of animals, probably hundreds of different species of companion animals. And we know they each have their own language. They each communicate within their herd or pack or hive or whatever. And so that was one of my questions is that how could you communicate with different species if they have their own different language and own set of concepts? So it would have to be that species think conceptually or metaphorically, I guess. Is that correct? Is that accurate?
Yes, yes to both. And what came up to me was a couple stories. One is I did a communication with a dolphin. They breathe consciously. Theirs is not automatic breathing. They have to think about every breath they take. And I couldn't do that. I was like, oh, like I felt like I was suffocating. I was trying to like show me what it's like to be you, right? That's one of the explorations. And that was really hard on me. I'm just even remembering it. Okay. Anyway, and the other one that I want to bring up is in one of the classes with Penelope, we had to communicate with somebody who freaks us out. And for me at the time, it was ticks. And I'm like, what's the point of ticks? What's a lot of people are ticks, spiders, snakes, worms,
Roaches.
whatever. Yeah. So I talked with ticks and
That should be the title of a book, your next book. I talk.
well, the beautiful thing, and so here I talked with this individual dolphin who I couldn't stay in that breathing, and so we worked outside of that. But with the ticks, it was the tick consciousness. So like them as a species. So when you said that they have their own communication, their role, and it's a really beautiful role, is they're holding a vibration like right on the mantle of the earth. Like they're like a thin overcoat, like a thin jacket. And they're constantly working on rebalancing and recalibrating the energy that's constantly shifting. I mean, it's 24/7, 365, right? What's happening in my front yard is different than what's happening in the park across the street to me in terms of the energy and the feelings. And it's relating to the geomagnetics underneath the earth and the soil types and whether there's water there. And so they just have a frequency relationship, which is really beautiful. Yeah, I don't like them. I still use, I've tried using natural things and I've still gotten ticks. So I do a product, a chemical product. But what that, what, go ahead, Ginger.
There is a product that you wear that actually sends out kind of a
yes,
magnetic frequency. It's called Tickless. The company is Tickless USA. And I saw a tick in the house once, and I had one of those devices. And so what you've said is just like goes right into how they did it, because I put that up next to the tick, and it was seriously like it couldn't figure out where it was going. And I'm like, okay, great. I'm gonna like armor myself with these devices so I don't get any ticks on me.
That's beautiful. Yeah. And so that actually, I mean, that's an actual physical result of what I just said, right? That you saw that in them. And, and the thing is so like I had a conversation with somebody who had gotten carpenter ants. Are they the ones that like will chew down your house? Some form of ant. And they had tried talking with them, and they were like, and they said, well, here, she said, here, I'll create a pile for you outside, whatever. And she wound up having to do chemicals because 6 months of trying, and, it's either the value of your house or, they would not live in harmony, like with a different location. But I did do that with mice where I had some mice get into my house and I said, look, you can't be part of my house, but I'll create you an outside habitat. And I, for the winter, because it was going into fall and winter, and that's when they were starting to come in. And that did work. So it's really, there is the consciousness of the species, and then there's the individual groups.
Right.
You know,
Well, I'm not sure if you know anything about my past, but after losing Malcolm to cancer, I backpacked from Austin to Boston, and I was on the road 2,300 miles with two of my dogs. And I was in Ohio, and it like rained. It was just a rainy April, I think. That created the worst tick season on record, and I think I still have ticks in my brain I'm picking out. But living on the road and living outside with my dogs, I developed a sense of things that I'd never had before and I haven't had since. And my guess is I was going back to my natural state where I didn't really need the weather radio to tell me when a rainstorm was coming. I felt the drop of barometric pressure. People would ask me, how did you, as I was staying with the family in particular, and I woke up early in the morning, like at 3 o'clock in the morning, and we were tending in their backyard, and I kind of sheepishly, they had a porch, so I broke my tent down, moved, and got us under their porch, and got us right out, and sure enough, within like half an hour, a massive windstorm and rainstorm that actually blew a neighbor's tree down, that could have potentially crushed us in the tent. It was a massive storm. And so I was speaking to the homeowners, the nice family that allowed us to stay for a night or two at their place. And they just asked me, they said, how did you know? And I couldn't describe it other than I felt it. I felt it coming, and I knew the urgency, and I felt the drop in barometric pressure. And so it is, I think that living indoors or living confined as humans have become, we've separated or severed ourselves from nature. And I can't help, and I know we talk a lot about that now, and more so that you got to get back to nature. But I truly believe that the cost of living and indoors, severed from nature, we have lost a part of our natural self and our
amen.
ability. Yeah. So I'm definitely interested in finding how to hone that, because I found in being on the road, my intuition was, at the end of the day, the only thing that saved us. I've almost been killed and run over, I don't know how many times, a lot, hundreds of times. And I chalk it up to the angels of all the dogs that we've lost from cancer walking with us, and also just an intuition that I had to hone and sharpen on the road, to the point where if I needed to go zig or zag, I just knew where to go, and we missed so many close encounters. I wanted to ask you, we're talking about how humans have evolved and sort of adapted, and then now we've kind of devolved. We've become indoor people on social media, and that does nothing but uptune your senses and I think your awareness and understanding of things. But we have a new technology that's coming out called Neuralink, and I'm think you're familiar. Are you familiar with Neuralink?
I'm not.
It's you should check it out. Yes, I highly recommend it, because it's an implant in the brains, and it allows a type of communication that's never existed before. And I won't try to describe the scientific aspects of it. I'm familiar with the basic science, but not much more than that. But for example, they just implanted it in a human, a quadriplegic patient, and he was able to play pawn or chess. He wanted to play. That's all he wanted to do. He wanted to play chess, and so that he was able to play chess with his mind. No joystick, nothing. He's a quadriplegic. And so where Elon Musk is the one that's developing it, there are a couple other companies that are doing similar research. But I find it fascinating. But where I think Elon and maybe other groups want to go with it is to try to for us to be able to communicate interspecies. and I do comedy, and I can't tell you, I just, to me, a neural link with my dogs would be a nightmare scenario because first of all, I live alone with dogs. I live alone with dogs for one reason, silence, right? I enjoy my silence, and I don't want to come home from a long day. And it's like, hey, Dad, what's for dinner? Steak again tonight? It's like, no, I'm tired. So, but it is interesting that I think we try to do pretty much everything with technology. And I'm curious if they're I'm curious to see if they're going to succeed, or if they're going to be able to create some type of frequency with which I guess we can commute with companion animals. Do you think that that is possible? That there's a technology that maybe can hone and enhance? It's like it would take somebody like me. It would take somebody like me where I have, I have sensitivities that I know that other people don't. I'm sensitive, so I'm maybe like 20% you, and I want to develop it more. So do you think that that technology will ever be developed that will help us not only become more sensitive, intuitive, more connected, but also allow us to speak or communicate, not speak, but communicate with other animals? What are your thoughts?
That's a really great question. So nothing will compare with the actual feelings you have. It reminds me of the whole AI boom, and that people, instead of, writing their own articles or whatever, are just throwing in a few things and give me a story. And and the reason, so I think it could have great potential, and it can have a dark side.
Absolutely. I only see the dark side. Actually, I try to see the funny side, but I mean, just to think about, if you're able to communicate with your dog, and they have different politics than you. I'm assuming the dog can communicate. They can understand TV,
Yep.
but you would have some type of communication, and that might get in the way, and you might see people returning or surrendering dogs to. I see a lot of nightmare scenarios that can come with it, but become of that. But I like what you said. It's an artificial way, non-organic way of doing something that what you were saying is that it's more magical doing it the natural way. And I was thinking about, I don't really go into it. I've never told anybody this story, and I just can't do it right now because I'll just start crying. I've never told anybody about the last minutes I had with Hudson, but there was a communication thing to that. And I can't imagine having that done artificial, that feeling, right? It's a whole body feeling. So I think what you're talking about
Yes.
is more whole body. It's all of you. It's all spiritual too, whatever we ascribe the spiritual aspect of ourselves to. The technology will never supplant that.
Correct.
Yeah.
Because the feelings, yes, are, I don't know how you could quantify them and or make them be tangible through a device. I just can't quite see that. Uh, but have you ever read the book Blink by Malcolm Gladwell?
I have not. I don't think I'm familiar with Gladwell. The name sounds familiar though. Is that
He wrote it.
is he with that training organization? No, that's Ian Malcolm. Nope, sorry about that.
Okay. And I read this book at least 15 years ago, if not longer. But what he talked about there is that, and so why I'm bringing this up when you're talking about these implants is, um, he said that 3/4 of, like, if a thought comes into consciousness, 3/4 of that second before the thought comes in, you've made your decision, and then it becomes the reality. It
Wow.
gets out. So it's like we already have this radar intuition, like you said, with knowing different places to be. I will not walk into a grocery store sometimes because it's like, oh, the vibe is just too much. I have left, or I have gone down different aisles because there's just, and it's kind of going back to the ticks. Thank you, ticks. But it's like,
As I itch.
yeah, I know, but it's like you have to, the it's like things are either in alignment with you or they're not. There's kind of no gray area that way. And and you get to decide what that is, you know. And so when you talked about politics, you know, are you for this one or that one? You choose those alignments. Like, I like a herding breed. I like an action breed versus a Papillon, who, you know, maybe isn't going to want to walk 4 miles a day. So it's like we make these conscious choices, and that's our right as humans. And that's why we come to be on this earthly plane, is to learn, grow, and deepen our knowing of ourselves. And our animals and the plants and the trees and the water and the air are all there to support us. And so having a device sort of like be that bridge, sure, I can see where it could have value, especially like you said, where somebody's differently abled and unable to use their hands or their feet or their speech or whatever. Like, my dad had a brain aneurysm. He lost his ability to speak very much for the last 20 years of his life. And I saw that frustration in him. So I can see it being very useful for issues like that. But I think it discounts what we are inherently able to be,
Yeah,
if we want to walk that path.
I absolutely agree, but there's so much noise in this world, and that noise disrupts that level of communication, that sense, right? Whether they're wavelengths or the energy, and
Amen.
and there's just so much noise, and I think I firmly believe that cuts off our ability to connect on a certain fundamental level with other species, even the human species as well. There's just so much, and I don't know how plausible, or if it's even possible to cut down that noise in society. But you definitely are. I mean, we're talking about something I've always tried to understand, and I've always tried to learn more about and practice more about. But there's one area that I find particularly interesting and I don't know much about, is reincarnation. And this is an area that you wanted to talk about. I'm fascinated about it. But Ginger, I know that you've always felt like you've had past dogs that have come that occupy the body of others of yours. So go ahead.
I do. Yeah. So my dog, Pete, I always thought like he was a reincarnation of my father, because a couple of times my dad used to always do this like that, and then there are times I would look at my dog and he's like, I'm like, are you in there, Daddy? But I actually had somebody who, I guess she didn't call, I don't know exactly. I'll say she was a communicator. I don't know exactly. And she came to my house one day and I had this big picture of Pete and we were talking about him. And I said something about, she said, oh, is he here? And I said, no, he passed away. I said, but he is here with me. I felt like he left me where I can't see him, but he is still around me. And she had some stuff to say about that. And then I said something about that. I thought he was my father. And she said, no, he's your grandfather. And I was like, I don't even remember my grandfather. He passed away when I was probably 5 or 6. I barely remember him. I said, you sure it wasn't my uncle? And she said, no, it's your grandfather. And she said, I can see him. And she described my grandfather to me. And it was exactly the way I remember my grandfather looking when I was, 6. And like he had this head of white hair and it was really thick and, all this stuff. And I was just like, wow. But I still feel, when you said earlier that you were devastated when your dog had passed away, your first dog, I thought that I would be devastated when Pete passed away, and I was, but I still feel that he is with me. And a cute, funny, spiritual, I guess, story with that is the day that he passed on his own. He had cancer, and I remember telling my sister, I said, if God is truly merciful, he will take him. And Pete was, he had cancer, so he wasn't feeling great the day before, but he was up and he ate and everything. But the next morning he did pass away. But that afternoon, as I would do, I was scooping, the backyard, and this white butterfly landed on my shoulder and just rode with me. Like, it was probably there for 10 minutes, Julie. And I had never really paid attention or never seen a white butterfly. And people will say it was a moth. I'm like, no, it wasn't a moth. I'm not there. It's the shining light. I didn't attract moth. It was a butterfly. And every year, um, the white butterflies come back around my house, don't they? Look, wherever I am, the white butterflies come back. And I remember one time one of my neighbors had passed away, and I think it was like the very first day of spring, and that it showed up. So every time we see it, we go, "Hey, Pete," and and it's everywhere. It's like they flit. Or sometimes there's one, sometimes there's two, and I'm like, "Are you bringing buddies with you?" But they are always wherever I am. It could be in my yard. I could be 100 miles away. I could be 1,000 miles away. But if it's in the spring or summer or early fall, the white butterflies are there.
I was shaking my head, yes, and I apologize for those that aren't watching this on our YouTube channel, listening to it on their podcast platform. But yes, I was affirming it. Yes, hey Pete. Every time I see a white butterfly, I always say, "Hey Pete." It's definitely a legit story. And if we know that we understand the concept of energy conservation, and that's a plausible potential explanation or rationale or description of reincarnation. How do you know it, Julie? How do you think it? What have you learned about reincarnation?
Oh, it's a beautiful question. And I see it as a spiral that we come in and out. And actually, it's a spiral in a infinity loop. And we come in and out. And at that crossing point is when we choose to come back because, an earthly form is dense. And so I know I'm not going to say this number 100% right, but I want to say that they say that we don't see 93% of what's out there. So
Yeah.
In our vision. And so and my dog Sadie, who was number 2 after Alta, I knew she was coming to the end of her life, but I was going to a workshop with Penelope, and she's like, I'll be fine. Talk to me while you're there. And that's what she showed me, was like, we go in and out of the denseness of being on this earth. And so when you were talking about this butterfly, that's exactly what happens. Is they decide, oh yeah, now I'm going to come into a form. And yes, it may be hundreds of miles away, but distance means nothing, because it's where you choose to manifest into. And so us humans, we normally choose a 70 to 80-year-old body. You know what I mean? We choose to live, obviously some die younger, some not, but other animals, I think they just found like a 300-year-old sturgeon or something here in Wisconsin. So we all have our individual paths within that spiral and that infinity loop that we come back and forth in. And in terms of the reincarnation and coming back, absolutely. Whether it's a person into a cat or a dog, but I'm smiling because Sadie, she came to me in dreams for 2 years after she passed. She died in 2009. And then she came to me and she was in this beautiful white robe, like a goddess looking being, and said, I have to leave you for now, but I'll be back. And a couple months later, a friend of mine had an oops litter. She woke up to her dogs. Her female went into heat like 2 months early. And she goes, Julie, if there's puppies from that litter, do you want one? And I said no, because I knew it was Luke's last year of life. He was now deaf and blind, whatever. And I said no, because I wanted to focus in on him, and I knew a puppy would take a lot of work. And I'm just bringing all this feeling into this, so just give me a second. So the puppies are being born, and she's saying puppy number 1, puppy number 2, puppy number 3, puppy number 4, red merle female. And I got right away that was Sadie coming back to me. And I was like, oh, but what about Luke? What about Luke? So I talked to another communicator friend of mine a couple days later, and I went and saw the puppies, and she left her mom to come and be with me. This puppy did, 3 days old. And so I called my friend and she goes, well, did you ask Luke what he wants? And he said he would like 6 months with her because he had been with Sadie when he came into the house, and she had been, his guiding light. And so Maya came, who's now going to be 12. So the puppies were all taken. Well, then that fell through. And so then she became available. And there were other parallel body things between Maya and Molly. And anyway, Maya and Sadie. So Maya came to live with us on Sunday, July 22nd. And she and Luke, she immediately took over being his seeing eye dog and helping him. He couldn't hear me with certain tones of voice, so she would guide him around and all of these things. And I was like, oh, but she said to me very clearly, she said, I may be aspects of Sadie, but you are in a different place than you were with Sadie. So it's more like there's threads of me in this body that's here now. And I'm here to bring you joy and help you have joy in your life. So I'm like, okay, and I'm, enjoying this. And fast forward to January, and wake up on a Sunday morning, and it had snowed that weekend, and Luke had a really hard time with snow and orienting. And so Maya brings him in, and he goes, and he loved his crate. That was his safe haven. And so he had a crate with the door open, and he went in there, and then he came out and he threw up, and he went back in there, and he drank a bunch of water, and he went back in there. And then he laid down, and I went over and I looked at him and I said, I think he's dying. And sure enough, I pressed his gums, and, they were white, and he died like within 20 minutes. And then I got it. That was 6 months to the day that Maya came to live with us, and he had wanted 6 months with her. And
Wow.
you can't make this stuff up. You know what I'm saying? Like, I didn't know this back in May when the puppies were born. And, and I didn't think that weekend, oh, it's 6 months that Maya's been with us. Nothing, So I wanted to bring that up because there's so much more out there if we just are open to feeling and knowing and having faith, trusting, because everything's always working for us. And that's what I love about the work I do, is because if one person shifts and understands their companion better, or gains some measure of peace, or feels more loved or understood, then the world's a better place.
Absolutely.
And that's, so taking the head out of it all and just really understanding, that we are in this spiral, that we just keep learning and growing, and to have compassion for ourselves and our humanness, like me calling Luke a jerk when he was 6 months old. Yeah. But then I redeem myself, as you said, but it's sort of like, okay, I'm not going to browbeat myself over those feelings, because that's me and my humanness. So then I just be open to what's possible beyond that.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Communication with people is in of itself such a complex and often not executed properly. I'm a firm believer that words really get in the way of what we're trying to communicate. And I know there are several people, several thinkers in this world that are thinking about the next evolution of communication, not being spoken language, that we're able to somehow impart concepts or metaphors, because language being the I guess more of the traditional scientific way of communicating it just fails us. So I've learned a lot I spent most of my life learning about science, and the probably the most important thing that I've discovered throughout my entire journey is that science is extremely limited. We know so very little about so much. And so the work that you're doing is so important, because I believe that it provides a critical piece to the bigger picture. Having a rational, analytical, scientific mind and the things that we discover scientifically, is important. But there's something that we're missing fundamentally, not only with ourselves, but the within the ecosystem that is Earth, right? That we just haven't figured out a way to work as one, which again, it speaks to our limitation of knowledge. But I'm very glad, Julie, that your mother did not pray away your gift. I don't think you can pray away anything. I don't think that ever works. I know people try to do it for all different reasons, but I don't think it works. But I'm glad she didn't, because your work is so important, and what you're doing is so important, not only to our relationship with companion animals, but also our understanding of ourselves as humans and our place connected in this world, this universe. So thank you for that. Is there anything? We're running a little bit long. We try to keep it to an hour, but I don't want to. I have bullet points. We didn't get to several things because we just. I love this conversation because we just explored and went whatever direction it would take us. So, but is there anything, Julie, that we missed here that you want to point out? Oh, I did. So you do have a company, so this is important to promote that, a business. So what services, so that our audience knows and where they can go, what services do you provide for people at Infinite Joy Now? What are all the different things that you do?
Yeah, so I do psychic readings, which is, people usually have a question about a career path or something, a relationship, whatever, and use that prescient in the guides that I have. I mean, this is all in conjunction with spirit / God, whatever your choice of word is there, the infinite. And so I do psychic readings, mediumship, which is communicating with deceased, the animal communication / interspecies telepathy, because it can be, for example, your property. You want to regain harmony on your land, or something's happening with your house, having a leak, or things like that. The intuitive soul healing is working with trauma, grief, unresolved things. And that works for the animals as well. I mean, that's part of, the suite of things I offer. I've had training in a bunch of different modalities that support that. But then there's also, just like going to a therapist, and getting to the core hurt or feeling. Certain things can be healed from that, whether it's physical, emotional, or spiritual, mental. Shamanic journeys, I've done a lot of those as well. And that's, calling in the spirits as well, from a sort of a different, more of a, I guess I would call it like a group effort with people and their animals. Yeah, and that's pretty much most of what I do.
Well, that's a lot. So you work with people and their companions as well, but people separately too. Do you enjoy
Yes.
communicating with animals more than you do Fuzzybutts, more than you do people? I would imagine that you'd have far more interesting conversations, communications.
It's always very humbling for me, because people, when they book a session, they'll always say, this is my problem, this is what's going on. And then when you get into the session, it unfolds into so much more. And our animals truly are here to support us. And sometimes they, by their behaviors, they make us open up. They like bring you to your limit. Like I said, Luke did with me. He brought me to the edge of what I could feel and beyond, and like cracked me open. And so, what I think is so beautiful is that synergy of the human and the animal shifting in their dynamic together. Does that make sense to you? So, I don't say that one's better, but I love seeing the ahas happen in the humans as they figure it out with their animal.
Yeah, I've spent so many, and I still meet people that think that animals are dogs. I have more experience than that with than other companion animals or animals in general. But I still talk to people that think dogs are dumb or dogs only understand at a fourth grader level. And I'm like, I spent hundreds and hundreds of nights in my tents with my boys, and I can assure you they communicate. We aren't communicating. There's so much more. There's a degree of intelligence that we can't measure. We don't have the metrics or the scientific devices to track them, but there's a lot more there than we understand. And I love that you're trying to find, you're trying to open people up to that, because that's what I do. I just do. I don't have the talent, the skills, and the years honing my gift, but I just try to, and I say the same thing, is that you're open yourself up to your mate, to your companion, whatever your companion is, because there's a lot that you have to learn, and there's a lot that you're not sensing. So, all right, that's wonderful. Is there anything else you'd like to? What is your website, Julie, that people can learn more?
Yeah, sure. So right now, and because I just hired somebody who's going to work with me on doing a whole new one, but the one that I have now is juliannemarie.com.
Okay, all right.
And yep.
And is there anything else you'd like to leave with our audience before we go, as we wrap?
Yeah, there is one thing. So in 2016, I spent a week volunteering at Best Friends Animal Sanctuary in Utah. And when I was reflecting on what we were going to talk about today, somebody came through from that trip that has a message. And it's a wild caught macaw that is permanent at the sanctuary, who was, by wild caught means it like it lived the first 20 years of its life in the wild. And it said, and this is why I guess it's coming up, is she said, I would give anything to fly free one more time if it means that's when I die. So that longing to still, that knowing never left in all those years in captivity. And we, as sanctuaries and helping care for others who are needing it, this bird is saying, in my essence is the freedom.
That's such a powerful concept. It's a powerful story in so many ways, because it speaks to the sensitivity that I have, and I certainly have towards animals, and also human nature is not vastly different than the nature of every animal we have. Freedom, we want freedoms and survival, the ability to survive. And I have a hard time seeing animals confined, constrained, caged, because it's not the natural thing. And I feel it, and I know it's not. I just know they're not happy. Their happiness is limited, more than more than it would be. And we do it for all the reasons of protecting them from the uncertainty of the wild, and yet that's where they want to be. Everybody wants to live and be free. I wish we had more time to explore that in of itself, but we don't. Well, hopefully we'll have a chance to do another. Have you written any books, or how are you imparting all this wisdom and knowledge to other people?
Yeah, I'm working on that as well with redoing the website. I have not written any books, but I'm feeling like that's going to reach more people.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, right now it's just working one-on-one.
Well, make sure if you title it "Talking to Ticks," make sure you credit Fuzzybutts and Friends, and donate 10% of the proceeds to the Puppy Ed Foundation. All right. You've been great, Julie. Thank you so much. There's so much more to explore. You're always welcome back here on our podcast. If you have anything new you're working on, or a powerful story, we could do a shorter segment. All right, everyone, we've reached the time of the show where we like to do a cancer tip of the week. Ginger, well, first off, I'd like to thank the Puppy Up Foundation for sponsoring that. Ginger, what tip do you have for us this week?
Well, we always talk about early detection. Well, with early detection, you get those early diagnostics, and we've had the folks from Pet DX on a couple of times to talk about that. But this is something that I want to reiterate. There is a blood draw test out there called OncoK9. You may have to ask your veterinarian about it, because I'm not sure all of the general practitioners do know about it. I'm sure that the oncologists do, but by the time you see the oncologist, you already know that you have an issue for the most
Oh.
part. So it's PET DX, OncoK9. It's an easy blood draw. I want to say that the test itself is probably, depending on where you're getting it done, somewhere between $300 and $500. But it's easily done, and you get the results back. It detects, I want to say, Luke, was it 33 different types of cancer? And it can tell, what it does is it will tell you that your dog has cancer, but it can't tell you where the cancer is. You know, my own dog, Sadler, came back with a positive diagnosis that he had cancer someplace, and it took a lot to figure out where it was. And you know, and in the end, he passed away from hemangiosarcoma. But at least I knew to look for something. You know, had I not known that, it would have been harder, much harder than it was for that. So look
Yeah,
up PET DX, OncoK9, talk to your veterinarian about it.
yeah, and go learn the early warning signs of cancer at puppyup.org. We've got 10 listed there. There are more, I'm sure, but boy, what a perfect cancer tip of the week. It's almost like I scripted this because Julie, if you ask me, if you ask most nearly every pet parent out there, what would communication would you want mostly communicated? And that is, hey, Poppy, I'm not feeling well today. Hey, Mommy, I'm not feeling good today, because we learned two things about cancer diagnosis and companion animals. It always comes late because they don't. You have no feedback. There's no information that they convey to you that their tummy's upset or they're feeling a little bit weird. They don't know what, like in the case of hemangiosarcoma, where it's something's going wrong, and then the spleen just ruptures. You know they're feeling it, but they just don't communicate it. Bone cancer, some dogs will run on their limbs until it fractures. And then you look at it, and the bone is spongified, and you think, God, that must have hurt. How the hell will nature design them? Because because of the predatory aspects of the predator-prey relationship, you can't act like you're a prey. You can't behave wounded. So that's like the number one most. I would imagine most pet parents would want communicated to them is when their companion animal, when their mate, their loved one is not feeling well. So hopefully you can work on that. And that's also, here's a good question before we go, Julie, do you have pet parents that contact you and say, I just wanted to be able to find out if my kid's feeling okay? Do people ask you that? Is there something wrong, or how's their health?
Yep. 3 times this week
Does it
already.
cost
Oh,
less?
wow.
Wow. Does it cost less or more than Pet DX? Pet DX is 305. How much does it cost to call you and ask you if my fuzzy butt isn't feeling good? There's the analytical side of my brain.
Yeah, but this is a really good segue, because I'm not a vet, so I can't diagnose. But what I can do is say, like, for example, the 3 this week, one of them, the cat has pancreatitis and kind of goes up and down with feeling well. And so I will get and so the whole point of me saying this is, if it's a quick check-in, their stomach's feeling like they feel a bit, I call it peaky, or like, wanting to salivate, those kinds of, so I can feel in them that, or they'll feel flat. They'll say things like that, or they don't like their energy normally is a 10, but maybe it's a 6, so there's different, just like with us humans, there's different consciousness levels of awareness, but there always is like some clues. And so like for a quick check-in, like it's $50 for 15 minutes, 100 for a 30, and 200 for an hour. But again, I can't say, oh yeah, they've got XXX.
Sure.
I can tell you what I see energetically out of alignment and imbalance, and then have them explain their feelings, and like maybe the med side effects, you know what I'm saying, like things like that. And
Yeah.
I have worked,
Boy, the side effects of the medications they take, because again, they just can't. Okay, we can look at their blood chem panels. We can do all sorts of tests, but we don't know how it makes them feel. So, you do a great job of disclaiming the fact that you're not a veterinarian on your website, and you recommend, of course, that everyone go see a vet. But to me, it's the left brain and the right brain. Do Pet DX. Actually, learn about the early warning signs so you know those. Do Pet DX, and then give Julie Louther a call. Contact her, and you get the whole thing. You get all the information, I guess, that you can get about your fuzzy butt. Well, Julie, thank you so much for all the wisdom and wonderful thoughts and experiences that you've had on your travels. All right, everybody, that's it for this episode of Fuzzy Butts and Friends. I want to give a shout out to our sponsor for this episode, Genie's Therapeutics. It's great. It's a hemp oil from which your fuzzy butt can get some just premium CBD oil. It's derived from a well-known, well-proven formula. And there's a wonderful company. They got new packaging. We love that new packaging. Ginger, I guess you don't have, you can't, you're not the Vanna White. You're not going to show the bottle.
No, I don't have,
That's right.
I'm not at home, so I don't have my bottle to.
Well, let's just say, if you have a fuzzy butt out there with inflammation or just isn't feeling well, I highly recommend you checking out genietherapeutics.com to see if your dog is a candidate for it. All right, everybody. We drop this on Tuesdays. Yeah, I'd like to thank our guest, Julie Louther, for coming on this episode. You could listen to this podcast on your platforms such as iHeartRadio or Spotify, or you can watch this on our YouTube channel, which is fuzzybutstudios.com. Until next week, everyone, thank you for joining us. Puppy up. Talk soon.
Bye.
Hi.
Bye, guys.